Salams from the People's Dispatch studios here in New Delhi. I'm Siddhantani and you're watching Daily Debrief. On the show today, we're discussing the WHO's warning about an outbreak of multiple contagious diseases in Afghanistan. We look at the struggle of working women in South Africa and we celebrate the unique sporting career of Serena Williams. First up, the World Health Organization has warned that Afghanistan's woefully underdeveloped health system is under serious attack from multiple outbreaks of communicable diseases, including diarrhea, measles, Congo fever, dengue fever, and of course, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic that is still ever present everywhere. Anna Vrachar of the People's Health Movement spoke via video conference to me earlier with more details on the precarious scenario in Afghanistan, including an update on the COVID-19 vaccination drive in that country. Anna, good to have you back on Daily Debrief, as always. The WHO report has some clear warnings, very serious warnings for Afghanistan. Could you first just outline the most significant ones for us, please, from this report?
Yeah, of course. So essentially, the WHO's regional office for the Eastern Mediterranean has recently issued a note about the situation in Afghanistan when communicable diseases, infectious diseases are concerned. And they warned that the country was facing several outbreaks of concurrent diseases. So, one next to another. Of course, there is COVID-19, which we know is still around everywhere. But what's good to notice here is that at the beginning of this year, less than 10% of Afghanistan's population had access to COVID-19 vaccines. So this has only recently picked up when the WHO has joined a vaccination campaign in July. And so things have picked up a bit when COVID-19 is concerned, and the vaccination rate is now at around 20% of the overall population. But, things are still far from where they should be. But in addition to COVID-19, WHO is warning that there is still the ongoing outbreak of measles, which has caused deaths over the last couple of months, as well as acute diarrhea, dengue fever, and so the space for additional communicable diseases to appear. So, as I mentioned, the measles outbreak has been going on for quite a while, and it has been talked about quite a lot. What we do know about the measles outbreak, and this is, again, not quite so surprising, it's that it's impacting children the most. So there's currently almost 65,000 cases of measles in Afghanistan. And almost 80% of the suspected cases between January and July 2022 were among children younger than 5 years old. So as many of the other conditions that are present in the country at the moment, children are bearing the brunt of this. This is also true for the diarrhea that I was mentioning before. So this is something that's come up a bit later than the measles outbreak. And for now, the WHO is saying that cases are at around 19,000, with 16 or 17% of those among children who are younger than 5 years. And 34 people have died because of the diarrhea outbreak. So it's not something that should be easily overlooked. And then, of course, there's something that we can relate to the overall condition of the health system afterwards and of the economic situation in Afghanistan. But it's important to mention that when we are talking about diarrhea and cholera, which is also there, these diseases should be addressed and can be addressed through living conditions. So, having access to clean water is key, having access to good quality fresh food is key. Accessibility to sanitation facilities is key, and we do know that because of the overall conditions, this is easier said than done in Afghanistan.
Yeah. Here in New Delhi, Anna, large numbers we see of Afghan patients coming in for all kinds of medical care, mostly for critical care, which they don't have access to back home. But of course, that's not something that's feasible for most people and unaffordable, inaccessible to most people. You were mentioning the economic sort of crisis that Afghanistan is in and the impact it's had on the healthcare system, both in terms of infrastructure as well as access. Can you tell us a bit more about how this sort of is evolving into a multifaceted humanitarian crisis? Or it already is, in fact.
Yes, so essentially the WHO itself is talking a lot about the earthquakes that took place in Afghanistan in June and July, so which have caused severe damage to infrastructure and have cut off ties between people and in road and communications infrastructure, for example. But then there is the added burden of the flooding, which we also have seen in July, of houses damaged during the earthquakes and the floods. And of course, you know, we are hearing repeatedly, almost on a daily basis, that hunger is an increasingly big problem for most people in Afghanistan. So only if we look at the WHO facilities that this report talks about, they say that in July, so only over the course of last month, they have had approximately 4,000 severely malnourished children being admitted. And that's also only in July in the facilities that they're looking at.
They are looking at, right.
If we look more broadly, so of course the World Food Program says that it's more than 20 million people, which is half of the population of the whole country, is currently in some kind of level of food insecurity. Most of them at crisis level or emergency level. But we also know that more than 1 million children under 5 are suffering effects of severe and prolonged acute malnutrition, which also means that, you know, even if they recover from this now, they're very likely to suffer more health consequences further in life. So it's not something that's going to go away so soon. And of course, you know, the appearance of communicable diseases in such settings should not come as a surprise. It's something that comes, you know, these things come into pairs and, well, groups even. Yeah. And it draws back to, I think, that something that has been repeated and warned about by many activists since last year, that the health infrastructure and the health system in Afghanistan is very weak. And this is not only because it was weak before the invasion, but it is also because during the invasion, there was basically no effort put into building an actual health system which would last. So in the situation where there is basically no money around and the assets are blocked, still the health system is essentially not able to cope with the needs of people. And some, again, are being hurt more than others. So some of the reports are quoting that women are affected more than men. So especially pregnant women and widowed women who live alone have experienced severe difficulties in accessing the healthcare they need. And this is unlikely to change without international action. So that's yet another long-term perspective, but definitely the conditions in which the health system in Afghanistan is currently in is not promising at all.
Yeah, yet another long-term impact then, Anna, of the US and NATO's invasion of Afghanistan and what the people now have to deal with for, I suppose, decades to come. Thanks very much for that unfortunate update, Anna.
Thanks.
On the 9th of August 1956, a brave generation of South African women marched in their thousands to the country's capital, the Union Buildings, to protest against the oppressive apartheid regime. Nearly 30 years after that violent racist system was overthrown and democracy came to South Africa, the working class continues to struggle. According to reports, the richest 10% of that country hold 85% of its household wealth. And conditions faced by working class women are particularly unfair and dangerous. As in much of the world, women in the labor force are consistently discriminated against, and there are massive gender gaps in terms of both pay as well as access to jobs. Women also face high and increasing levels of sexual and other violent crimes. Fakamile Hlubi Majola, spokesperson for the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, one of the largest trade unions in the country, are calling on the anniversary of the historic 1956 protests for a true revolution in that country. Right, welcome to the show, to Daily Debrief. I don't know if you know, but we've used a little bite of yours on the show before, but this is the first time you're joining us live for a conversation. I was reading the press release that NUMSA sent out, and there's a line in there that says very unequivocally that women, working women particularly in South Africa, are under siege and unsafe everywhere in the country. Could you tell us a little bit about what these working conditions as well as social conditions are that are leading to this kind of scenario for women in South Africa?
Yes, good day, and thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate, of course, the support that you guys give us in the work that we do. As the largest trade union in South Africa, when you look at the statistics of how far we've moved as women, but in particular as Black women in this country, it's hard for us to celebrate Women's Day or Women's Month. Traditionally in South Africa, the 9th of August is a very important holiday. It's a holiday where we commemorate the Great March of 1956, where close to 20,000 women during the dark days of apartheid marched to the highest office in the land, to the union buildings, to demand that the then Prime Minister J.G. Strydom must remove or do away with the Dompa system, which was a pass system which was used to regulate only African people in South Africa during apartheid. So we felt that when you analyze the true conditions of the working class in this country since the dark days of apartheid, and you also analyze it in conjunction with the demands that we were making at that time, we do not think that the South Africa that we are living in today is what we were fighting for under apartheid. We were fighting for genuine freedom, for genuine equality. We were fighting for not just for the right to vote. We actually wanted a better life. We wanted access to quality education, access to quality healthcare. We wanted quality of life, improved living. But when you look at the conditions overall of the South African working class today, we're talking about here almost half the population, at least 46%, are languishing in abject poverty caused by unemployment. By far, the majority of South Africans are still living in those horrible conditions in townships, in squalor, in shacks. They are denied access to water. They're denied access to quality education. They're denied access to healthcare. So it's almost as if we are still living under the same poverty-ridden conditions. The only difference is we have the right to vote. And is that really freedom? You know? And when you add to the mix how women, working class women live, it's even worse. We've got extremely high levels of violence in our society. A couple of days ago, I'm sure even yourselves would have heard the terrible reports of 8 women who were gang raped while shooting a music video. You know, it's shocking, the levels of sexual violence that South African women are exposed to on a daily basis. And that for us is proof positive that when we were fighting for an end to apartheid, what we settled on was a soft form of apartheid, which is capitalism. You know, capitalism and all of its the horrific byproducts of capitalism, which is violence, poverty, suffering. We're still experiencing that. So as far as we're concerned, we do not think that we've moved far enough in terms of emancipating the working class in this country, especially when it comes to the freedom of African women.
On this very important day, like you were telling us, Pax, both symbolically and otherwise, what are the demands specifically that NUMSA is putting forth?
Well, we do support reforms that have been made by progressive organizations in relation to steps that could be taken to make life safer for South African women. For example, we support demands for the fact that if men or if people are arrested for crimes of a sexual nature, bail must be denied, long jail sentences for perpetrators of sexual crimes, we demand and support demands for building of shelters for abused women and for any kinds of reforms that will make it easier for women in abusive relationships to escape their abusers and to be free of their abusive situations. But we also recognize as a trade union and a socialist-inspired trade union that those are simply reforms. And if we really want to transform the society in a meaningful way, we need to fight much more than just for reforms. We should actually be fighting for a complete transformation and an overhaul of this capitalist society. We should be fighting to create a genuinely socialist society where you put the needs of humanity first, where all state resources are used to improve the lives overall of all the citizens of this country, where land is nationalized for the benefit of all, where minerals are nationalized so that we can actually fund a proper educational program, where people have access to free quality education, free quality healthcare. These are all the kinds of progressive changes that we want to see. And we recognize that this is only possible if you actually do away with the capitalist system.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us on Daily Debrief and sharing all of that, Pax, and for, of course, both your time as well as your role in this continuing struggle.
Thank you so much for having me.
I went from a C-section to a second pulmonary embolism to a Grand Slam final. I played while breastfeeding. I played through postpartum depression. Those are the words of Serena Williams in a Vogue article that announced her retirement from the sport of tennis, a sport she doesn't want to quit, but has to choose between continuing to compete or growing her family. I quote again, she writes, "If I were a guy, I wouldn't be writing this because I'd be out there playing and winning while my wife was doing the physical labor of expanding our family." But she is a woman, and so after a 27-year career fighting to be treated the same as male athletes, she will call time on competitive tennis after the upcoming US Open Grand Slam. Sports writer Shada Ugra and I spoke earlier to celebrate the wonder that is Serena Williams. Shada, welcome back to Daily Debrief. We are both celebrating and a little bit upset today, of course, because the greatest tennis player arguably in the history of the sport has decided to evolve away from the game in an announcement that I guess tennis journalists are a bit pissed off about because it happened in Vogue magazine and not in one of their publications. Just take us through some of the highlights of her career from your perspective, and how is this sort of final tour, goodbye tour, sort of going to play out?
Yeah, Siddhant, just such an incredible story. I just happened to watch after the whole world, I think, the story King Richard, the movie that was made about her father and how he brought these two daughters up. And I think, Serena, as sports journalists, we tend to look at people in what they've achieved, as in number of titles, all the other things that are there. So 23, and you're watching the men struggling like to get to 20, 21 Grand Slams. And I was just wondering whether we would ever say about, when we're talking about, say, Roger Federer or something, arguably, the only reason we say arguably is because Serena Williams happens to be female, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing that literally comes up in everyone's head almost spontaneously. But I think her career is extraordinary because she, for so many reasons, other than just athletic achievement, I think she changed the way tennis was played, women's tennis, through the physicality with which she played it and through the power with which she brought to her game, and which now you watch, generations that follow her, that's how they play. That's how the game is played. Her fighting spirit. Serena used to turn into, when she was trailing or she was down, she just turned into this beast, and she was in beast mode, and she would just come out and fight like hell. And for a lot of women's sports, these are all virtually, they are sort of doors that have to be walked through. They are sort of barriers that have to be walked through. And both Venus and Serena did that because they were prominent African-American athletes that came out in what is a completely white, clubby kind of a sport. And it's like they came from this sort of rough neighborhood, and it's like they bought a little bit of that, hustling and that kind of really aggressive tennis to women's tennis. And Serena literally then went and eclipsed everybody else, like he just blew them off the court. And then in the fact that she also is a very forthright person when it comes to speaking about things. and she's very, there's no body shaming that all athletes go through. With her, there are no sort of rules and restrictions. She won whatever she looked like, whatever size and shape she happened to be in. And her success and I think her self-confidence was such a big message to everybody out there. I don't think she needed to be liked. But I think she was definitely respected by everywhere she played, and for her that's fine. And this whole thing about moving away from tennis, both I saw in the movie that her dad said it was very important for them to have a life outside of this. He didn't want burnouts, and I don't think she's never burnt out. She's sort of gone out on the flame on high when she has chosen to. Incredible career in so many ways.
Yeah, shout out also, of course, to her elder sister Venus, and together, I mean, the two of them, what they have done in this sport is, I don't think, well, at least not in our lifetimes, probably will anyone come close to matching that kind of success as a pair of siblings. So these final, I suppose, the final US Open for Serena, home Grand Slam, and like you were mentioning, she's got all these diverse interests. She's got, I think, her own fashion line going, and all kinds of, she's always been into fashion and all of that consistently. Also got a family and all of those things. Any clues on what, or has she given us any clues on what she's going to be up to next? Is it going to be a public profile, or is it just going to be a more private life in the future?
I think it'll be a private life. This is America. Nobody wants, no celebrity wants a private life, pretty much. So, and yes, like you said, as like all a journalist, I'm saying, but please, sports journalists, give the tennis journalists a sort of preview and say, this is what I'm doing and it's coming in Vogue tomorrow. Just do that little bit. Anyway, that's completely of no interest to anybody who's watching this. But I would say definitely a life in fashion, in business related to it, I suppose. In all kinds of sort of maybe social issues around disadvantaged kids and so on.
Racial inequality as it exists in America.
Exactly, and like we're seeing, after them, like Coco Gauff speaks of what Serena Williams meant to her, and almost like creating. I think people also forget that she had friends, of cross-cultural friends across the tour. People don't talk about the friendship that she had with Caroline Wozniacki, when she went through that very public breakup and so on. And I don't think people talk about the fact that even though she was a star athlete, she had a rapport with various sort of people and things around her, and an unafraid and an unabashed person in that sense. And I think she will always find sort of her brand name, Queen Serena is something that you don't just sort of retire it into silence. I think she'll have she just won her tournament. She just won a tournament in Canada recently. So she knows she has the game, but whether she wants to sort of compete with people virtually 20 years younger than her, 10-15 years younger than her, it's going to be difficult. Maybe she doesn't want this life anymore. But we'll definitely see her. I don't think she'll go away. I think her farewell tour will be just grand in full New York kind of style. And I think it should be watched and appreciated in that way.
Looking forward to that, Sharda, and we'll chat with you again as the tournament draws near or draws to a close, depending on how that goes. Thanks again for your time. That's all we have on this episode of Daily Debrief from Sharda, myself, and the entire People's Dispatch team. Thanks very much for watching this episode. As always, for more details on these stories and others, visit our website, peoplesdispatch.org, and give us a follow on the social media platform of your choice. We'll be back again, same time, same place tomorrow. Until then, stay safe. Goodbye.